Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I have a wonderful guest today, Kiveli Dörken, fantastic pianist. For everyone who doesn't know you yet, please introduce you, what you do, and
I'm a pianist as well. Actually, we grew up together, musically speaking. I joined the class of Karl-Heinz Kemmerling when I was 7 and studied with him until his death when I was 17. And you joined his class, I think, shortly before your 13th birthday. So I'm half a year younger than you. So then in the last 5-6 years, we kind of enjoyed being in his class together. And then after he died, we both also changed to Lars Vogt's class and studied with him for the next 10 years, sadly, until he died as well in, I think, 2 years ago it's now. So yeah, we've, I think, enjoyed a very similar musical education, have had very similar, I would say, ways of approaching practicing, approaching playing concerts, and kind of just came up together in the musical industry. So that's why I would say we're very, very similar from a musical perspective.
Tell us, what do you think, if you could break it down to a few points, what would you say are the most important aspects when it comes to interpreting piano music?
I think we have to remember that in classical music, we are not, as in maybe other musical genres like country music, where composer and interpreter are the same person, we quite consciously separate those, especially nowadays. Of course, there used to be people that used to be composer and interpreter themselves, if we think about Mozart or Bach, but there always was a tradition of rediscovering old music and interpreting music of other people. And I think that especially nowadays, you have to act as the interpreter, not the composer. So I would say the most important first guideline is be loyal to what is written. And I think that many people, or at least I often have encountered people that consider that to be somehow something that prevents you from fully expressing yourself. And I would argue that it's exactly the opposite, that if you really adhere to the framework that is written to the piece, you then have the safety and also the right frame to go wild within that frame and completely express yourself. I think the important thing to remember is that in classical music, the works, they talk about really universal, complex, and nuanced emotional landscapes that we all experience. So if a composer has decided to, for example, showcase the emotional landscape of sadness or confusion, if the interpreter then goes and, because maybe they want to display their own technical prowess, and instead of showcasing confusion and sadness, goes ahead and showcases like virtuosity and anger, that's a different message. And there is a place for virtuosity and anger. But if the composer wanted to show confusion and sadness, which are more subtle emotions, maybe less popular emotions, I think we should trust the audience enough to convey those emotions, those more subtle emotions, which means if it says piano, play piano, don't play forte. If it says allegretto, play allegretto, don't play presto, even though you could play presto. If it says forte, don't play fortissimo. And I would say these are like kind of the, I would say, stereotypical ways that musicians often try to go against the grain. Or for example, if, I don't know, you play chamber music and someone else leads the melody, then be in the background and support from the background. Don't try to showcase yourself. So I think it's always, I would say, if you try to boil it down, the ego of the interpreter should never be in competition with the ego of the composer. Mm-hmm. I think the interpreter is in service of the composer's message, and is the medium with which you can communicate that important message to the audience.
Brilliant answer. I couldn't have put it a better way. Now we know what the meal should taste like. We know we should let go of our egos. Mm-hmm. We know what we want to express. But what's the recipe to get there? And what helped you to develop the technique, memory, to overcome the fear of performing from where you started, I don't know, almost 20 years ago to now? I
mean, that's a completely different question. It's more of a practice question, a perspective question on performing. I think that probably one of the most important things that I learned, because I think as many musicians went through a profound stage fright phase, and especially having started very young. When you're a child, I think you concern yourself less with, like, you've practiced and maybe you like really want to impress your teacher or your mother, but it's all much more abstract. So you kind of just do what you practice, and then you're happy to, I don't know, get an ice cream after the concert. And at some point when you get older, you suddenly realize how vulnerable you actually are on stage. So that's what happened to me, and I think what I know has happened to many musicians. And then suddenly stage fright strikes, and things that used to work before don't work anymore. And that is connected to shame that you then feel, that is connected to self-doubt, that is connected to you believing that you've somehow you're somehow not progressing, or maybe you're getting worse. And this is all not true. I think the first thing you have to acknowledge, both as a person performing and as a teacher, is to acknowledge that fear is a part of it. The goal to erase fear from performing, I think, is a misguided goal. Not just because fear can propel you to other heights, but because it's simply unrealistic. I think I've met musicians that pretend not to be afraid, and that level of emotionlessness that they display in that arena often translates into the way they make music. So I think fear is not the enemy. Fear needs to be cultivated and needs to be confronted again and again and again. And I think you should accept that you're going to have phases in your career where you are less afraid, phases where you're more afraid, and then in the end also get away from this negative connotation of fear, and understand that most people that have done amazing things, whether that is in the sphere of performing or it is in the sphere of something completely different, did not do those things because they were simply less afraid than the average person, but because they counteracted that fear with even more courage. And I think that this perspective of when you are nervous and you are backstage and you know you're going to go on stage in 2 minutes and you're afraid of messing up a certain passage or afraid of having a memory slip, instead of thinking, oh, I wish I was less afraid, accept it. Okay, here I am, afraid of these things. Let me generate more courage. It's much easier to do something than to try not to do something. So I think this is like my sister and I, we play also a lot of duo concerts together. And she, just like us, had the same teachers. And we have this thing that we sometimes say to each other before we go on stage for a particularly difficult concert, which we call fight mode. And we say, get into fight mode. And it is this image of, it's not about pretending like this is easier, or it's about understanding that you're about to, get into fight mode with yourself in a way, with your own inclination to be afraid. And I find this to be just a much more realistic approach. Don't try not to be afraid. Try to be more courageous than you are afraid.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and also translates to many situations people also experience to their daily lives, like job interviews, or also talking publicly on stage. The fear of being in front of others and being judged in a way is, I think, very inherent.
And if I could add something to that, I think what also many people forget is that we pretend that, for example, when you go to a job interview or when you go and play a concert, that the audience is adversarial to you, that somehow they're there to judge you, or that the person doing the job interview is there in particular to judge you. Remember that the person doing the job interview wants to find someone to fill that job that they trust. So they're also searching for something. The audience that is there in your concert is searching for being inspired, for getting strength, for, at the very least, having an enjoyable few hours in the hall. They're not there necessarily to judge you. And I think that maybe also our society that has absolutely accentuated these judging type of relations between people, where there's actually much, much more going on than just a judgment. Of course, in some way, you might go on stage and the only person you think of in your mind is maybe the journalist that might write a critique of your concert, and you're trying in your mind to play in a way that you think that journalists might enjoy in order to get a good critique. And that is normal to want to do that. And I mean, as much as I've tried to convince myself not to care, of course you care on some level. However, again, it's not about forgetting that you care about that. It's about caring about something else more, caring about reaching your audience more than you care about impressing the journalist.
So again, it means letting go of the ego, not just thinking of yourself, but also what do the other people actually want. And they don't want to judge you mainly, they also want to have a nice experience and to also experience all the emotions that you have just talked about. Right. Okay, so if people want to find you, what are your next projects, and where can people find you if they want to also follow your pianistic career?
To be honest, I'm not, and I don't see myself in the future being one of these people that cultivates a social media presence alongside concerts. Nevertheless, of course, I do have an Instagram. I have a homepage that people can go to see what concerts I'm playing. And what I'm a huge fan of is, in-person conversations. So if someone does want to connect to me, I would encourage them to write, to come to a concert, to meet me, and then have a conversation, or ask if they can talk about something else.
Yeah, you landed on my YouTube channel on social media.
Yes,
that's exactly where you landed. And I will give you the website here so you can find Kiveli. And, if you want to apply for a first free piano lesson with me, do that at aaronpilson.com/academy. And you will find Kiveli and me hanging out together in Berlin. You're also welcome to join us for a drink at some point.
And then have a real conversation.
Have a real conversation,
which would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you again in the next video.